A pleasure to meet all at last, and welcome back to some more super foam flying. And now for today's review. When it comes to the Mega line, there's plenty of intricate picks out there to choose from. Some are good, some are bad, some are small, some are big, some seem to be underdogs that were able to keep the series alive, and others might have in fact proved to try to take the series out intentionally or even just on accident. If there's one in particular though that I could probably pick out that seems to be in the middle, yet somehow does better than most of the others so far, then I am specifically talking about the Mega Rotofury. And so, we got ourselves a Mega Rotofury here, which is basically the same thing as a good handful of blasters out there, with a combination of a Raider-esque grip, as well as a large cylinder that is capable of holding a good amount of Mega Darts to go with. And not to mention a single tactical rail on top. But in all seriousness, it's a little more than just the sum of its design, its quirks, and its functionality. And so, I feel like that this is just me talking specifically about this blaster, but in all seriousness, I do consider the Rotofury to be a great addition to that, as opposed to what we've seen from the Mega line entirely. And a lot of people might think otherwise when it comes to the Mega line, as it did introduce a whole different kind of dart system. But it's not always about the darts that's there to make the series better, by all means. It's about the product, it's about the loyalty towards the consumer marketplace. And it's also about listening to what some people are expecting. The sort of criteria that gets played upon by almost everybody out there, including myself. And I feel like that this blaster actually does manage to accomplish a good chunk of that criteria. Because first of all, the ergonomics in this blaster seem to be almost spot on in a ways to have molded to my own hands. And I can certainly say that they actually work in tandem so well that I feel like that I might just be outclassing almost every other blaster I've talked about. Even the Contractor and Eagle Points, which I feel like that they might have been the best blasters out there so far. Literally, the best I could have gotten my hands on by this point. And so, you might think otherwise, but there's a lot of people out there who might go by opinions, whereas I go by facts. And so this might actually not necessarily go up as high to encompass a rivalry surrounding the Contractor and Eagle Point, as well as a good other amount of blasters out there that I've seen so far, because aside from those two, there have been lots of others that I have in fact seen and tried out myself, and I am very satisfied with the purchases that I've made across the board with these blasters entirely. The Contractor and Eagle Point seem to be perfect in almost every category that you could ever think of. And I feel like that the Rotofury does seem to qualify to be up at that spot up there on the podium, as opposed to what I've seen with almost every other blaster that I've tried so far. And with the first Flying with the Foam series on HJN, with a grand total of 87 blasters that I've tried out, there are a huge amount of blasters out there that I have tried. And so far with this sequel series here on HJN revolving around this particular topic, I am finding a lot of other things to talk about with this one. And I'm also finding a lot of other traits, quirks, features, functionalities, and etc. that are going to be helpful in allowing for me to find blasters that might actually be all the way at the very top. By my own account, I have found a lot of great examples that might just get up to that point. But in all seriousness, I feel like that the Rotofury, at least for a Mega Blaster, does actually seem to qualify for that position. And I've talked about a lot of other Mega Blasters, if you remember when I've talked about the Teroth, the Moto Strike, and I've even talked a bit about various other older ones, including the Centurion, Magnus, and Thunderbow, which of course weren't really on YouTube, but you probably get the point where I'm saying if you've been long-time viewers of my content, regardless of what social media platform that I'm iterating on. And in any single case out there that you might get to know me by any sort of social media platform out there, then you can definitely be sure that I have in fact had the chance to talk about blasters of all sorts since I first started doing any of this kind of stuff. And so, all the way from the very beginning in 2005, when I even started Kaiju Force Neo. But let's not remember that that's exactly what it was called, because it was not Kaiju Force Neo at the time. It wasn't until a while later that I eventually figured out the good name that has stuck around with me since then. And so, even to this day, I do feel almost indifferent about it. And I still feel indifferent about Nerf blasters as a toy, as a hobby, as a collector's piece, and as something to talk about here on this channel or otherwise. And with that in mind, that pretty much just concludes this part. But one other thing about the Rotofury that I can at least highlight before I close off in this episode is the fact that, well, it's got slam fire. And so that basically chalks it up to a T. So you know what? Yeah. I consider this one to be the best Mega Blaster out there. Slightly more so than the Moto Strike, or even another blaster out there called the Twin Shock. And I've even talked about other Mega Blasters out there, in which I've given similar perspectives on. But in this particular case, we have ourselves a win here. So, Rotofury or not, you might not feel the same as I do about this, but it is still an impressive piece of plastic. And so if you want to see more go out on my channel, then make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.